logos that you're probably familiar with on the screen so we can take a look. The Apple logo, the Amazon logo, Innocent Little Tasty Drinks, not a logo I'm really familiar with, but I find it to be very cute. The Nike logo, Twitter, Chanel, Coca-Cola, Starbucks, McDonald's, BBC, Audi, FedEx, Mercedes-Benz, Underground, and Google. And actually, I have the old Google logo here. Whoops, I have to fix this slide. So one of the things that, you know, maybe you've noticed it, maybe you haven't, but I'm going to point them out to you. On the Amazon logo, you know, sometimes when we first look at it, we see, you know, the smiley face, like, oh, you know, a smile, getting a package in the mail, which not for nothing. I'm sure every time we come home and you see the Amazon box, you're like, my things are here. If you're a big Amazon person, I'm a big Amazon person because I don't have a lot of time and their prices are great. And I feel guilty every single time a brick and mortar store goes out of business. I'm like, oh, it's probably for me. I'm such an Amazon person. But one of the things you might not have noticed about the logo is if we look at like this little smiley face, it's actually telling us that they have everything from A to Z. Amazon, it has everything from A to Z, which they do. I mean, if they don't have it on Amazon, I'm just convinced that it actually no longer exists or doesn't exist at all if Amazon does not sell it. So just a little thing you might not have noticed in the logo. Then we have the FedEx logo. So, you know, they deliver. Not gonna lie, of all of the delivery companies, my FedEx driver is the worst. He really is. He will, if I have a delivery and it is, you know, 4 o'clock and it hasn't come yet and it's supposed to be there that day, it's not coming. And without fail, I will get some sort of a notification at 5:30 saying that my house doesn't exist. Every time. If he's running late, he just puts in that the address can't be found, and then somebody else delivers it the next morning. My FedEx driver drives me bananas. But with that being said, they're supposed to be very efficient, and it's all about getting your package to you. So nestled in the FedEx logo, if you look in between the E and the X, the way the negative space comes together, we have this nice arrow there, you know, to signify them getting your packages to you. Getting there. So just 2 little things that I wanted to point out about those 2 logos. And it, you know, both of the things have to do with an arrow. So kind of interesting. So is a logo a brand? Yes or no? That's what we're going to talk about next. So think about that for a second. Is a logo a brand? A logo is not a brand. You know, it's a visual symbol of the brand, but it's not the complete brand. So that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind when we're talking about branding or we're talking about logos. And I feel that the confusion for that really comes from the way that people tend to interchange those words, whether or not a logo is a brand. And you may hear me walking away for a second. I just needed to grab my iPad and I left it on the counter. But yeah, and I feel like I said, I feel like that confusion really comes about, and I think it's marketers. Marketers love to talk about branding. And sometimes when they are talking about the branding of their brand, they are including the logo, because the logo, it is a visual symbol of the brand, but it's not the only piece of the brand. So that's something that, you know, we really do need to keep in mind when we're using those words. We should really use them correctly and understand which is which. So with that being said, oh, here we go. I knew I had something that I wanted to open up. Here we go. Regarding this. So what is a brand? You know, again, we kind of know what that logo is. That logo is that visual symbol. And asking yourself or asking the question, what is a logo or what's a brand? It's not a dumb question at all. A lot of times designers and agencies, like I said, when they're interchanging that word, they can get confused about the critical distinctions between a logo and a brand. So I wouldn't be surprised if our clients, when we meet with them, are completely confused and they don't know the difference. And often when clients are referring to, and again, I'm using air quotes here, our brand, a lot of times they're talking about their actual logo. They're not even talking about their brand. And a number of designers, agencies, web developers, marketing firms, public relations people, they claim that they do branding. But more often than not, they're actually referring to logo design. So yeah, you might do branding and part of your brand is coming up with a logo, but that's not the whole picture. So this guy named Marty Neumeyer, he had a book called The Brand Gap, and he actually has one of the best definitions of what a brand is. He says a brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or organization. So that seems kind of simplistic, right? Their gut feeling. But at the same time, having a gut feeling about a product, service, or organization, or having a feeling about it at all, that's a lot more than just a logo on a business card, right? So, the brand is kind of that sum total of all of the experiences, impressions, or knowledge that a person has about a product, service, or organization. It's really about the perceived emotional and functional benefits. Those are those gut reactions versus the actual benefits or attributes of a product or service. So if your client has a business and they have customers, they already have a brand of sorts, even if they're not really clear about what it stands for. And even if they're not really working to define or shape it in the eyes of a customer, their brand is the basis of, their position in the market, and it's their competitive advantage. So think of Starbucks, okay? Starbucks has a logo. Their logo is the mermaid. It used to be, the mermaid was kind of small, and then, she kind of got bigger and started to take over as, as almost the entire logo. But then the word Starbucks just went away because they were like, you know us, you don't even need to see the word Starbucks. And it's true. But why do we know them? Why do we know them out, as Starbucks by just seeing that icon? Is it because of their logo or is it because of their brand? And it's because of their brand. Starbucks is so branded as being a coffee giant that we know who they are by seeing that mermaid. We know who they are when we see that emerald green. We immediately attribute that green to Starbucks. So again, the logo, that's a tangible way to express some of the essence and characteristics of the brand, but there is no way that a logo can represent or illustrate everything about a brand. It just can't. And that's why, when I think that's where designers have the hardest time. And I know I do too. I put myself into that category of having a hard time. I can always see it in others, and I will still do it myself, where there's just too much going on in this logo. It becomes too much. And that's because we are trying to illustrate everything about the brand as part of the logo, and it can't be done. And we need to just simplify, and realize that the logo is the visual symbol of the brand, but it's not the complete brand, and it can't be. So a good logo, it's an important brand asset, and it's a way to help differentiate that brand or that company from the competition, but it's not the entire brand. It can't be. And I think once we stop and realize that and let that happen, it makes our job of simplifying that logo a lot easier, because the logo can't tell the full story. It would get too complicated. So which of them's more important? Is a logo or a brand more important? And honestly, it's not one or the other. You know, they're both. They're both equally as important, because both a strong brand and a compelling logo, they're important if you're trying to position a company and drive its growth. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do as designers. We're trying to help our clients position their company and drive that company's growth. You know, we kind of hold the key with our designs on whether or not that's going to happen. It's a lot to put on our plate as designers, but that's why we get into this, and that's why we need to try to do the best for our clients that we can. So, you know, you can probably think of a few companies that have, again, recognizable, even creative logos, but maybe you don't hold any respect for that company because of a personal customer experience that you might have had with them, or maybe something that you've read online about that company, or something that you saw in the news or in the media. And then there might even be companies that you do business with that you love their products or services, but their logo might be awful. So, you know, again, the logo is tangible, and it is the place where we tend to put a lot of focus on the company, but that can be sometimes putting the cart before the horse. You know, it might be, if a company isn't doing well, it might be that they don't necessarily need a new logo. It might be that they need to rethink their branding. So something to think about going forward. So again, you know, I really wanted to get into what a logo versus a brand was with you guys. So this is what I mean about getting a little too complicated here. All right, so let's talk about it. Is it a logo or not? So this is kind of interesting, but is it a logo? No. There's a few different things going on in this why it's not a logo. Number one, it has a picture, as in a picture that you took with a camera, and you do not have rasterized elements as part of a logo. Your logo needs to be completely vector. It needs to be scalable in all situations, which means it is not created in Photoshop. You can't have pixels as part of your logo. Also, this is just way too busy. We've got this green background going on. We've got these doodles here for some reason. We've got this circle with the gradient. We have the photo placed in it. It's not even centered. And then the name Mountain View Greenhouse. And the name is typed out in a chalkboard font, which maybe you like a chalkboard font. That doesn't matter. What you like for fonts, and if you've ever taken typography with me, what you like for fonts doesn't matter. You need to stop and think about what type of a message that font conveys. And the message that a chalkboard font conveys is children, school, kids writing on a chalkboard, or a menu board you might see somewhere, something like that. This has, you know, chalk has nothing to do with a greenhouse that sells flowers. So the message, very confusing. This font is a very confusing font for that. And quite frankly, this, I wouldn't even say this is very interesting. It's kind of a hot mess in a way. So definitely not a logo. All right. So now we've kind of simplified this. We've got this font here, Mountain View Greenhouse, and we have a picture of a greenhouse. But again, all right, this is a little bit more interesting, but is it a logo? No, because we still have this rasterized element here. This is not scalable. It's not a logo. It's a picture with a headline over it that says Mountain View Greenhouse. Plus, this font, yes, it's okay to have a type-only font, but there's no design element to the font. And what I mean is if you just put down your cursor and type the name and you don't do anything to adjust anything other than typing the name, that's not a logo. That's just type on the page. There needs to be that element of design. And if you aren't quite sure what that element of design is, you need to do some research. You really need to, go out on your own. Look around. Look around your house. Look around at products that are in your house and look at the logos in your house that you can see. And I can go ahead and bet you that probably 99% of the logos that you see on products in your house, they're even those that are type only, there is an element of design to that type. It's not just typeset. There's some kerning, some leading going on. There's, some adjustment to the colors. It's not just typed out. And I have a good example here that I'm going to show you. I just went and grabbed it. Again, looking around really quick on my counter. So hold on. He's kind of asleep. Maybe I won't have to bounce the whole time, so you'll be able to see it. All right, so my son uses the Playtex Baby bottles. So this is going to show it backwards. But you can see, this is just a typeset logo, this Playtex Baby. But there is an element of design to this logo, meaning, the words aren't just typeset and nothing else. And I'm actually going to pull up the logo online so you guys can see it. Hold on. Playtex Baby. Here we go. Meanwhile, these really are the best bottles if you're in the market. All right, so let's take a look at this logo. So again, very simple font, but you can see where the L has been brought in closer to the P. The A, there's, this A is nestled in with the Y. The T is almost touching the Y, but it's not. And then the E and the X, they've actually connected. And then what they've done is taken Baby and nestled it right in here, up into where the ascender of the B is starting to come up in between the Y and the T to nestle into that space right there. And then you have, if you can drop a line right here from the X right to the edge of the Y, and then they have the trademark, just kind of floating small out here, because they realize for a good visual alignment, it makes more sense visually to align the right-hand side of the X with the right-hand side of the Y as opposed to the M in the trademark. So again, completely typographic logo, but it has that element of design. There is thought behind how it is laid out. So that's what I mean when I start talking about, does it have an element of design? It needs to have an element of design. That's what I'm talking about. So this does not have that. Plus, we still have that rasterized photo. All right, next we have this one. Mountain View Greenhouse. All right, so interesting. I don't know why it has this black box right here. Interesting. Let me take off that border. No border. See if I can make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. And we'll present it again. There we go. So interesting, I guess, but is it a logo? Honestly, I guess we're getting closer technically. It's not easy to read because this shading here, like all of these different textures going on, do not lend themselves to readability. The circle, why is it there? Is there a purpose for it in the design? And the purpose is so that way you can say that there's an element of design there because I added a circle. That's not a purpose. It's kind of busy. And again, you know, people are going to be driving by fast. You want to make sure that they can read the words. You know, if it's something for package design, you know, there's going to be a million different other products up on the shelves with it. You want to make sure that, you know, customers know the product and they can read the name if it gets small. So these are some of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're creating a logo. So I guess this is getting closer to being a logo, but it's not there. It's not a well-designed logo. All right, here we go. Interesting, is it a logo? We finally have ourselves a logo, ladies and gentlemen. And it's very simple. It's mainly typographic with just this very, very simplistic, iconic element with it. We have, it works in black and white, which this one probably wouldn't work in black and white because it would just look like all of these smushes of gray. So we have some good tone here. You know, Mountain View, I can see the mountain in the horizon. Mountain View greenhouse, very simply laid out. We have two nice fonts put together. The fonts definitely have a, you know, some element of design to the typography. And this is a logo, and this is a very well done logo. And it's not overly complicated, right? It's very well done and it's very easy to see. It's very legible. So this is what we're looking for, something simplistic. The simpler the logo, the better. That Playtex baby logo, very simple, but very well done. So you want to keep that in mind. All right, so again, why is this one the best of the bunch? It's simple, it's iconic, it works well in black and white as well as in color. We don't even need to see it in color and we know it's gonna work in color. Like we can actually see it in different tones of green, right? It would work embroidered on a shirt. It's not going to lose anything by being embroidered. It would work up on a billboard, nice and big. It will work really small on a business card. It would work well on a website. It will work well in print. That's the thing about a logo. It needs to be versatile and it needs to work anywhere and everywhere. And some logos just run into the problem where they don't. So again, why does a good logo work so well? It has simplicity. It has unity. It's logical. There's a logic to the design. It's consistent and it's creative. So simplicity, again, your logo needs to be recognizable in a variety of sizes and contexts, thus overly intricate illustrations or color gradients should be avoided. One of the things I will tell you, and I run into this with people all the time, is you also want to stay away from borders. And I want to just do a quick illustration of this because every time I teach this course, I kind of run into this issue and I try to nip it in the bud as soon as possible now to show you why it is that it's not going to work, but also to show you a way that you can make it work if you so choose to want to design, you know, a logo with the border. So let's take a look real quick. Let's do a new. And I'll just put up 3 artboards real quick. All right. So let's say that you have, yeah, I'm just gonna type up my name real quick. So here's my name. And one thing you're always going to want to do when you are designing a logo and you have it all set and you're good to go and you are sure that this is the one that you want, keep a, and I apologize, he's starting to get a little bit fussy. Keep a, an example with just the text. So that way you can go in and you can change the font, you can change the text if you need to. But then the one that you would show your client, the one that you would submit, you want to make sure that you have that with the text set to outlines. That is one of the main things that you want to make sure of. You never want to send out your logo with the font not turned to outlines, because you know, there's a good chance that people aren't going to have the font on their machine. So you want to make sure that, you know, it doesn't default. It usually will default to this Myriad Pro. And if you did not design your logo with the font Myriad Pro, having it default to that and having your client open it up and it looks like a big old mess, that's not a good look for you. So make sure that you always turn your fonts to outlines before you submit them, you know, before you submit anything to your client, before you submit any of your work, definitely before you ever send anything to a printer. You're going to want to turn it to outlines. With that being said, always make sure that you save a version for yourself that isn't turned to outlines. So that way, if you do need to make some adjustments to your original file, you're able to make those adjustments and you still have the fonts. All right, so with that being said, what I'm going to do is I am going to show you an example of putting, you know, just a border on this. I'm going to put a pink border. And let's zoom in real quick and take a look at what it does. So the way it puts the border on the text, even when it's, you know, set to outlines, it does it the same way, is it starts to encroach, the border starts to encroach on the inside color. So if I go in and I scale this, it's not going to scale proportionally. So as I make it bigger, the border actually gets smaller. See what happened there? And then as I make it smaller, so say for a business card, you almost can't even see the black anymore. That pink, the border is staying the same size, 1 point. Whether it's at 100% or it's at 300%, the border is still 1 point. So 1 point is really big when this is really small, but 1 point is really small when the logo is really big. So that's why I tell people, you know, it's, you know, try to stay away from borders. All right, but let's say that your design calls for it. And I get that. There's going to be instances where your design, it really needs to kind of have that border and you know, as part of the design element. So what I want you to do first, turn it to outlines. The way you can do that is Command-Shift-O, or you can go up to type, create outlines, right, which would be right there. And then what you're going to do that will work better than adding the border as a border color is you're going to add an offset path. So select, you know, what you want the border to be on, and go to edit, or wait a minute, object, path, offset path, and it's going to pull up this dialog box. And you want to set a preview. And the preview is going to be something crazy, like this 0.1389, which is obviously like way too large. So I like to start at like 0.08 and then just kind of hit tab, 0.008 maybe, because I made this a lot smaller. There we go. And you can zoom in by hitting Command plus, or whoops, or hit OK first. There we go. And then zoom in. And it's still selected. So don't click off of this right now. Just click on the color and click the pink. See? And you can see what it's done is it's actually, and I'm moving with my cursor right now. I'm just moving it over. It created the exact mirror image of my selection, placed it behind it, and proportionally scaled it to run proportionally bigger in the background. So now I have not altered, you see, the black text on the top. So when I scale this, I'm going to do Command A and scale it. Do a uniform scale to just, we'll do 300%. It's going to proportionally scale that border, see? It's not, you know, the border didn't get super, super small like it did when I just added a border color. So what I can also do is make it a lot smaller. Whoops, let's do 10%. Tiny, 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 and we'll zoom in. Which, remember how there was almost no black left? Well, it's proportionally scaled that smaller. So that offset path, that can solve that problem of, you know, needing to have a border. All right, so I'm gonna go back into our slideshow and I'm gonna take a quick break and see if I can calm this little guy down. So I will be back and we will get into our next one, which is Unity. Okay, and we're back. So we just went over that simplicity and, you know, talking about the borders as well and not using the borders and, you know, everything that I was just kind of showing you and demonstrating, that kind of goes back to that simplicity too. One of the main things when it comes to simplicity is that it shouldn't be so intricate. So sometimes, you know, adding all of the colors or too many or a gradient or a border or all of these different things, it's all of those things that just kind of, you know, make it more complicated than it needs to be. And I get it. Sometimes when I am designing a logo as well, I need to say to myself, stop, just stop, simplify this, keep it simple. You know, try to use the KISS acronym. I have to tell myself that all the time. Keep it simple, stupid, where I'm the dumb one in that scenario. But like, you know, and I get it because we're like, well, I'm creating a logo. I'm being paid a lot of money. Like, shouldn't I just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going with this? But going back to some of those logos that we looked at, the ones that work the best, look at how simple they are. And if you're having trouble stopping yourself from going and making it too complicated, go back and look at some really simple, classic, iconic logos and say to yourself, all right, why did those work? And they work because they're simple. So again, you know, keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it simple. Next, your logo needs to have unity. So a logo is a visual representation of a company, and mixing styles in font, color, or imagery, that can often result in a confused message to the consumer. So when I was talking about this one right here, and I said, you know, it can be confusing. What's the message here? What I meant was, you know, and I went into mixing that font and using that chalkboard font. Why are you using that chalkboard font? You know, a chalkboard font has a specific message, and that message might be children or school or something along those lines, and you're using it for a greenhouse and it's sending a mixed message. So right there, you're mixing styles and your message is confusing, meaning there isn't that unity that you want your logo to have. It's definitely missing. Make sure that it's logical. So your logo is a visual representation of your company. Again, if you're mixing those styles and those colors, there isn't a logic to your logo, and that again, it confuses the message to your consumer. So although, you know, you might have a pure typographical logo or wordmark logo, and it's often very effective and flexible, and that's a great way to show your company's identity. Oh, I apologize. All right, apparently we have to continue to bounce on this ball. It is important to remember that, you know, typefaces, they carry character traits and they can unknowingly contribute to a logo's perception. So again, going back to that chalkboard font, and the reason why I keep bringing up the chalkboard font, is I know a lot of people find those fonts to be fun, or they find possibly, you know, Comic Sans to be fun. And it's another thing where, you know, that's a child font. So you need to think about what that message is and what the perception might be if you use a font like that, because it carries a character trait and it can unknowingly make your logo be, you know, have a certain perception. So you want to keep that in mind. Consistency. You know, does this logo work in every space where it might be placed? Is it going to work on a billboard? Is it going to work on a business card? Is it going to work on a pin? Is it going to work embroidered on a shirt? You know, a gradient can't be embroidered on a shirt. That would be a nightmare logistically. So you need to stop and think about that consistency. And usually if it's not going to work in every place or space where it's going to be placed, you have to go back and simplify it. That's usually what fixes that. Is it creative? You know, are you capturing the spirit of your company's character? Yes or no? It's really easy for us to, you know, make a logo of a bagel shop that has a picture of a bagel and put the bagel shop's name. Like, you know, that's not really thinking outside of the box right there. So, you know, it's what we might do with that logo that makes it creative, or what we might do with that bagel that makes it creative. So kind of keep that in mind when you're creating your logo and trying to be creative. Seems like my all of my slides got doubled somehow, so I do apologize for that. That one was doubled, and there was another one that was doubled as well. All right, so which one, let's see. Which one's the current logo? Usually I cover these and I have you guys do I quiz the people who are here, but it's just me here and the baby, and he doesn't know which one's the current logo. They're all new to him. So on the right is the current Cadillac logo. Then the Olive Garden logo, new one, is on the right. Much simpler. And again, look at how much was going on in the old logo, which was fine. It's like they just took their sign and they were like, this is our sign, so just make it a logo. And then somebody somewhere was like, you know, guys, this is a sign. It's not really a logo. We really need to simplify this, and we, you know, need to make something vector that's not a complete pain when we send our logo out places, which their old one, the sign, complete pain to be sending out places. The Marriott, again, very, very simpler now. You know, you could see where they kind of had like the part of the M in here, but it wasn't even the same. I like this. They, you know, they kept the interesting M that they have, but this is a much easier to read font, and it's kind of become more iconic, as in an icon that way. Vistaprint versus Vistaprint. So again, they had these, you know, these gradients and very 90s colors, let's be honest. The yellow, the pink, and the blue, very 90s feel to this. And instead, they've taken the idea behind the gradient and they've reworked it. So they're currently gradiating a blue, but using color blocks to do it. So it still has the feel of the gradient right here without it actually being a gradient. And that's a very creative way to fix this problem. And then a much simpler font, you know, the Vista in bold with print. But why? What's Vista? You know, it's not really a word that stands out on its own where it should be bolded. If anything, in this logo, I would have thought the print would have been bolded. But again, you know, they're realizing, like, how can we simplify this? And I think that the rework of this is great. Disney Channel, old and new. Both of them are still a pretty complex logo. They've got a gradient there. And there's actually a lot going on in this logo. We've got like a bevel and emboss going on. We've got some shadows going on. We've got a gradient going on. In all honesty, this is almost color-wise the more simpler of the logo, and of the two. And I would have dropped this gradient background and just had Disney Channel in probably this blue be my logo. That would have been my suggestion, because in, vector-wise, this is kind of difficult to deal with. But also, you have to think of where the Disney Channel is really, where their logo's being used, and it's really being used on a screen only on TV. So this probably does end up working out fine for them. Bacardi, their new one versus their old. This was an extremely interesting approach. If anything, I like this font much better, but they've added in a picture. So when it's blown up, it looks even more pixelated than it looks right here. If anything, I would have gone with the vector, simplified this gradient background right here to be something along the lines of just, the red circle on its own. Use the vector bat with this font. But, again, nobody asked me. But this is also, again, you can see where it's been reworked, but it's problematic. And even professional companies, they don't always get it right. New PayPal, I like it. It's much simpler. It's much more updated. You still have the two, like the double P's overlaid on each other, and you can see where it gets just a little bit darker in the overlay. I apologize again. Hopefully he'll let me make it to the end. Maybe he doesn't like maybe he's sad about the new PayPal logo. The new Reebok logo. Hold on one second. Okay, so the new Reebok logo. The old Reebok logo, not gonna lie, in a way, kind of ripping off that swoosh thing going on with Nike. But the new logo, what is this? Why is it important? It's an icon for kind of being an icon, and I guess that's okay, but I don't understand. It kind of, not for nothing, this icon kind of reminds me of a car emblem or something I would see, like again, on the front of a car, and I just don't know. I want to know why. Why is this here? Why are we doing it this way? But again, it is a little bit simpler than this. This was very close to what Nike was doing. And the new Volvo kind of has a gradient. They made their name smaller and set it inside of the circle with the, with the arrow coming out. And I found that to be quite interesting, and I'm not exactly sure why. It's a redesign just to be redesigned, and I don't know. I almost don't see the point in the Volvo redesign. And then Airbnb, I think that their new logo, much simpler. This always bothered me, that the R was not connected to the B in here, and that the B and the N weren't connected, and it didn't really matter why. Okay, again, I apologize about that. So back to the Airbnb logo. So that logo has always kind of bothered me, the original one, how the R was not, this part right here wasn't connected. Like, why can't, it should have been. And then this part, not finding a way to connect it. I just think that this is so much simpler. I think that they did a much better job with the new logo. So again, well done. So here's a couple of font resources for you. Font Squirrel and Typekit, which is now, actually, I'm going to rename this. It's now Adobe Fonts, and it loads directly into Adobe when you add your fonts, and you probably use them in your other classes. And, go in there, take a look around. It's kind of good to kind of get an idea of why some fonts are better than others for logos. You know, size has a lot to do with that. So really just kind of try to poke around and get some resources for yourself for this week. So tomorrow in our live session, we are going to go over the assignment and the assessment, but I do want to take a look at our week 1 discussion and go over the background of it and some of the objectives of it so you can get started on that discussion question for this week. So our objectives are going to be to analyze the relationship that exists between a logo and a corporate identity. Logos, so here's our background. A logo is considered to be the visual representation of a business. Its main purpose is to identify the company to the general public. A logo is most often made up of the company name and some sort of graphic element, a symbol or an icon. In a logo, font, color, and overall composition all work together. Ideally, a logo is unique and easy to recognize, inspiring confidence and positive feelings in all that view it. And again, that's a lot to expect from a piece of artwork. So, you know, try not to get too tied up in the feeling of it. So a corporate identity extends the logo across a variety of marketing materials and products to ensure that all products are consistent in design and thus are easy to recognize for consumers. A corporate identity is the company's image and includes anything visual that represents the company. So relationships between logos and corporate identities. A logo is key to creating a common visual representation of a company. A corporate identity shows the boundaries for how the logo can be used and how it should appear to the public. So in this way, logos and corporate identities have a symbiotic relationship, meaning they both depend upon one another to broadcast and promote a business. For example, while the logo for Nike is the iconic swoosh, the corporate identity for Nike shows how and where the swoosh should be used in a variety of settings. When working with a company, the logo is generally the first element designed. Going through the logo research and development process helps clarify the company goals and overall mission. Once the logo is developed, this information also guides the corporate identity, helping set the tone and mood for how all supporting elements appear. So here's your prompt for this week. So for this discussion, I want you to imagine that you've been hired to first create a logo for a new ice cream shop. At your first meeting, the owners told you that their favorite colors were pink and orange and that they like really wacky and wild designs. And the owners are looking forward to working with you, but they're not really sure what kind of information you need from them to best complete your design work. In approaching this task, what other pieces of information might you need from them to help you develop their logo? What questions would you ask them to access that information? And once you have a strong direction for the logo, what sort of things would you need to consider to create a cohesive look and feel throughout the dishes, signage, bags, postcard advertisements? So for your citation for this week, you might use articles that show examples of the logo and corporate identity process. And you can also find articles from experts that suggest what questions that you should ask a client when you're developing a logo. For your initial and reply post, you should work together to develop a group understanding of this topic, challenge each other, build on each other, always be respectful, but discuss this and figure it out together. So again, you need to have a main post of 150 words with one citation and 2 follow-up posts of 50 plus words. Make sure you're not copying and pasting the same exact follow-up post to 2 different people. Be specific to who it is that you are speaking with. And again, make sure you're clicking on the reply button to add in your post. So again, tomorrow in our live session, we're going to go over the assignment and the assessment for this week, but we can take a quick peek into that. So what you're going to be doing for the week 1 assignment is you're going to be doing a logo redesign. So you can kind of look over the I think there's 5, yes, the 5 different logos. And start to think about all of the things that we talked about today on why a logo might not be working. And I can tell you right away why these logos aren't working is they're more pictures than logos. They're too complex. They need to be simplified. So let's stop and think about that before we get into tomorrow's live session, where we really start to dive into how we can fix these logos and how we can get them to be simpler, how we can make sure that the style matches up with the company. And you'll notice that there's a folder for each of them that needs to be downloaded. So go through all of the pieces if you want to tonight before we dive into the assignment more tomorrow. And then for your assessment this week, you're going to be researching and defining 3 questions that reveal a unique logo in corporate identity strategy. So you're going to be conducting library research this week and writing a paper on a specific logo. So we'll get into that a little bit more tomorrow as well. All right, so thank you everyone, and I do apologize for my little guy being a little bit loud during our live session. I'm gonna see if I can come up with a better plan for tomorrow for him. But if you do have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me, and please make sure that you are responding to the email that I sent out this morning, so I'm sure that our lines of communication are open with each other. And have a great night.